Hi, in this video, I'll be discussing the 3 key mistakes that we see enterprise IT make in their attempts to create an agile IT service management solution. So I'm Jeff Jameson. I'm president of Whitlock Infrastructure Solutions, and we help guide enterprise IT on their journey to next generation IT operations. We've been really fortunate over the past 20, 25 years to work with some of the most amazing companies in the world, the largest companies in the world across virtually every industry, whether it be energy, pharmaceuticals, retail, healthcare, and even the federal government. And when you work with these big companies across all these industries, you get to see a lot of different approaches, different styles, different challenges. But one thing we've noticed is that there's still a common thread across all those is the enterprise scale that is very daunting and creates many of the challenges that we see today. So let's dive into this. So first off, the first mistake that we see is customers start to evaluate a new platform or a new IT service management solution is they'll reach out to an analyst. Yeah, right. Many IT organizations have some sort of a relationship with a key analyst firm. I'm not here to degrade in any way the role that an analyst plays, but we see sort of a single vision approach. So they reach out to their analysts, they get a perspective. And what we found over the years of doing this is that analysts sometimes have bias, or they just have old data. If you think about how the traditional reports come out, there's a year of research, then there's a presentation of that research, and then there's a year of lag while they're continuing to research for the next release. So sometimes the data that you see from an analyst could be as old as 2 years old. And so in our industry, those things change so dramatically that 2 years is a lifetime, and things can be very different from when they first created that report. So that's number one as part of this analyst discussion. Two, just that bias idea. Many analysts, they have their own personal bias, their own experiences. It's very difficult to have an experience across all platforms and really have a sense for what's happened, how the technology has evolved, what new features, what integrations, what capabilities exist. It changes so rapidly that their bias may come into play. So we just suggest when you're looking at the perspective of some sort of an industry leader, get many perspectives. Don't just rely on one. Do your research. And there are even analysts out there. I put quotes around that, analysts that are driven purely by crowds. It's a crowdsourced analyst. So you get perspectives of real customers using these tools, not just from an individual or a team of individuals that are doing their own reviews. We have a customer, as an example, that leverages Gartner heavily. And so whenever they make technology-based decisions, they look at what Gartner says. And if Gartner provides guidance in any form, they take that pretty seriously. I wouldn't say they just unilaterally make the decision that way, but they weigh very heavily the comments and feedback they get from Gartner. And that's usually where they start. And if they get that feedback, they start down the path, they sort of like what they hear, they'll get tunnel vision and they'll go forward because that's what Gartner says. So what we would suggest is break out of that. It's so easy to get that tunnel vision and get comfortable with an analyst. And I would challenge them sometimes, even if you're talking to a customer, because companies like Gartner, they create these peer reviews, and so you can get into a session with other of your peers from different verticals and industries, and they will provide feedback and discussion and kick ideas around. And Gartner's usually coaching all of these companies. So shockingly, they're all using very similar tools. And so when you're an outlier, you get shamed to a certain extent that why aren't you using these tools? We're all using these tools. You should be doing the same thing. And sometimes I think people fall for that. And what I would suggest is, even if it's a great decision, challenge them. So, it's easy if you're a decision maker and you've made a choice that costs millions of dollars, and then you get around a group of your peers and you're asked, did you make a good choice? How likely are they to say, well, I just wasted millions of dollars? Probably not very likely, right? They're going to say, wow, I made a great decision. Well, I'd ask them, why is it a great decision? Did you stay on budget? Did you stay on scope? Did you finish when you expected? What kind of feedback do you get from your users? If you had it to do all over again, would you follow the same exact path, or would you choose a different path? May end up with the same choice, but would you at least get different perspectives along the way? And you might find that if you dig under that a little bit, you get a slightly different answer. And it would, I think, point to the idea that you should do the same. Go dig a little bit more and don't just trust, one analyst or one person's perspective. So how we've seen this manifest itself is sometimes when customers go down this path and they make the choice, maybe without all of the due diligence that you might think they would make, is that the first thing that occurs is that the employees of that organization have resentment. They weren't consulted as part of that. I've been in buildings where we have had great relationships with many of the teams associated with supporting service management, and they'll say, we weren't even consulted. We were told we're going down this path, and we don't even know how we're going to do it. We don't know if it's the right tool. We don't know how we're going to integrate this. Are they hiring somebody? Literally, just a decision made in a vacuum without incorporating the feedback from everyone in your company. That, you're basically creating a foundation for failure, because if the team isn't bought into this, they're going to look for ways, whether it's purposely or not, they're going to look for ways to undermine that because they don't feel part of the solution. And over time, what we've seen when you start to kind of fast forward after years, we have seen customers come back and say, this was a lot more expensive than we thought it would be, and it was a lot more complicated than we thought it would be. And working with this particular vendor has proven to be a little challenging. And so all of the shiny, exciting things that you get from other peers that you may be working with or from an analyst, some of the shine gets rubbed off, and all of a sudden you see, wait, it's never as rosy as they share. Now now you're stuck with this. Did you make a good choice, and how do you make the best of, I won't say a bad situation, but maybe a situation that could have been structured better for success from the outset. So that's number one. Number two is a lack of thorough planning. I use the word thorough specifically here because I know in almost every case, certainly enterprise IT does some form of planning, but how thorough is that planning? And I'll give you some background to understand how thorough this needs to be. So first and foremost, you've got to do research internally to understand what are the overall goals and objectives of the organization. I get that when you're starting to look at new technology, it's easy to sort of chase this shiny object and look for features and functions that you might think align to the needs of the business. But are you really looking at the business perspective of that? So start with overall business goals. And then make sure that as you're evaluating different technologies, do the capabilities that you're trying to build into your ITSM tool allow you to drive back to successful outcomes for those business goals? Really important. How do you do that? Well, the first thing you do is make sure that you bring in all the possible consumers or constituents that are going to touch, use, customize, engage in any way the IT service management platform. And so no matter what role, whether they're going to be developing, whether they're outside users, inside users, they're administrators, they're people that will have applications touching it or integrating to it, it's critical that they all have a role so they understand what you're trying to accomplish as you build this out, how it's driving back to those business goals, and how they can help you achieve that. Now you might say, well, that's pretty tough, right? How do I get that many people involved and get them all to agree on a solution? The answer is you won't get them all to agree. But if you include them all, it allows you to make sure you've taken everything into account. But more importantly, you'll get reaction from them. You'll get engagement that allows you to find compromise. If you build it and they will come, hoping that they enjoy and get value from what you've done, they'll be much more resistant. So if you can get them engaged early, have everybody participate, and then they'll acknowledge, well, some of these features or capabilities that I need create big problems for others. Let's find a happy medium here that allows us all to be successful because we're pushing towards a common goal that drives better business value. Thirdly, and for me, the most important is this idea of leaving behind this monolithic, difficult platform, very common in enterprise IT from 15, 20 years ago, having built IT service management solutions that required lots of consulting, lots of time, complex deployment, months, years, lots of complicated integrations, et cetera. And then finding themselves some years later stuck, needing lots of outside consulting, needing to hire lots of internal development resources, unable to upgrade, unable to integrate, certainly not agile, because anytime someone needed something, as the business evolved and changed, which it will do, and it will do more frequently now, that all of that becomes very difficult in this sort of monolithic world. And so they're stuck. You're stuck. You can't upgrade this platform without a massive investment. So people get excited and they look to this new shiny object that is, hey, let's move to this new tool. And we can start afresh and we'll fix all of these problems. Well, what we've seen many, many customers do is that they go back to the same place. They want to be agile. They want to adopt out of the box, look at best practices. And as soon as they start to engage, they find that, wait a minute, we can't just take this out of the box. We can't use best practices. We're different. We're unique. And I get there are some cases where that's absolutely true, that the business demands require that customization. And that's fine. If that's the case, then you make that decision and you go forward. But what I'm talking about are the instances where businesses make the choice that they want to become more agile. They don't want to have that monolithic, highly customized solution that they can't upgrade. And then they rebuild it and create the same problem. They choose a tool that requires heavy consulting, requires developers, is expensive to manage, is expensive to upgrade. And there you have it, you're stuck. And so instead of looking for a way to build a standalone agile IT service management platform, you've built this complicated platform that you're running business flows from, and it's integrated to everything everything in your business, back office systems, HR systems, et cetera. And you're stuck right where you were. So a specific example of where customers go back to where they started from this, we had this big, complicated, monolithic, non-agile platform. We want to adopt an all new platform that's modern, built on modern infrastructure. And then they rebuild the same thing they did. And it starts with the same words we hear uttered almost every time from a customer. We get it. We made a mistake last time. We want to follow best practices. We don't want to go build all of these custom processes. We want to find a way to restructure our processes to be lean, agile, efficient. We sit down with them, begin the requirements building, and it starts with, okay, here's what it looks like out of the box, and here are the capabilities, and here are the workflows and the best practices that are built into the tool. And the first time they see it, the reaction is, oh, we can't use that. No, that's not going to work for us. And they start to change it. And that's the beginning of the end. That's the beginning of the failed implementation, because they won't entertain changing their processes. And this is a debate in the ITSM world, which is, should the tool be flexible to allow the customer to modify them in a way that it aligns to the customer's best practices, or it should be the other way around? And And this is the debate that we get into with customers is that, look, you can change it and that's fine, but here's the impact of making that decision. And we work really hard to make sure they understand, do you recognize that if you go down this path, here's what you will say 12 months hence? And almost every time they make the conscious decision to rebuild what they were trying to get away from. And I get it. It's a political battle. It's very challenging to sit in a room, just as we talked about earlier, with all of these key influencers, consumers, et cetera, and trying to get them to agree on a common approach to anything associated with this. Now you're talking about heavy lifting, process changes that everyone has got to adjust to. And nobody wants to fight that battle. And so they rebuild and recreate the same problems that they were running away from. And so if you go down that same path and you're not willing to fight the difficult battles as part of the planning and building of your new ITSM tool, you're now moving away from agility. And that's the part that's frustrating for us as consultants, is that it's the key driver that we look at. When we look at the challenges that enterprise IT faces today, agility is the number one challenge. Finding ways to be agile, to keep up with the demands of the business. And as soon as you begin to go down these paths of rebuilding, you won't be agile. And you'll be right back to where you were. You'll be struggling with those demands. You'll have frustration from the business, and you'll be looking to redo this all over once again. Another outcome of sort of rebuilding, moving away from your old monolithic platform to this net new monolithic platform that just has a shiny new logo on the front, is that as you rebuild that and you add in all of that customization and you bring in developers and those sorts of things, you're driving up the cost significantly. And so the total cost of ownership is going to increase significantly. And certainly if we got into a more in-depth discussion, total cost of ownership, lack of planning is going to create situations where there's more rework. And if you choose a platform based on an analyst perspective, there is no such thing as one size fits all here. A platform that is designed and works well for one organization, it doesn't mean it's going to work well for somebody else. Every company is different. Politics are different. Technology skills are different. Underlying business systems are different. Demands from customers are different. And so if you don't align properly with the tool with the business, if you don't plan accordingly, and then you build in lots of complications, all of that drives up total cost of ownership significantly. So a specific example of how total cost of ownership can be impacted by this monolithic system idea is that we see the simple changes that a customer wants to make. They want to move fields around, change drop downs. You can choose the simple task, something that should be quickly done. Someone internally should be able to do that. It doesn't require planning, et cetera. What we find is that as these systems get so complicated and they get so customized, that people are afraid to touch it. And so if they want to make simple changes, be agile, well, they can't, because now simple changes require planning, require engagement of the manufacturer or the consulting firm that helped them build it. It requires release cycles. And all of a sudden, simple, agile changes to the system become projects or get rolled up into what we often see again. They just get rolled up into, we'll do a massive upgrade. And a massive upgrade in this case, it becomes almost a re-implementation of the entire system. So another outcome of building these monolithic platforms of 15 years ago is that you're creating a platform for business flows. That's what we see: a lot of customers, a lot of advertising, a lot of activity around using IT service management as the business flow engine. And what we would suggest is taking a look at a way to break those apart. Have a set of tools or a business flow engine product that allows you to build those business flows, but keep it separate from your IT service management platform. That allows you to stay agile, focused on the role that IT service management plays. And even if we start to look at where IT service management is headed, ESM, enterprise service management, you can still have an enterprise service management platform that is the single place for consumers to access anything that the business needs. That doesn't necessarily have to be the business flow engine for the rest of the company. And by keeping them separate, you have a chance for having an agile solution across both fronts. But the more you integrate these into common platforms, you create, a single place that is very difficult to address the needs of all of the consumers at the same time. In summary, it's, get lots of input from multiple sources. It's do thorough planning and have a process from a planning perspective to engage all the proper constituents and make sure you start with business goals and objectives first, not technical features and capabilities. And lastly, you choose a platform that allows you to genuinely be agile, that is easy to use, is easy to integrate, and it, in essence, forces you along the lines of best practices so you don't build yourself into a box once again. So in closing, if you enjoyed the video today, please let me know, or if you have other thoughts or other challenges that you've seen, love to hear from you. I know that the list that I had, the three challenges that I've highlighted here, it's certainly not comprehensive, but they're the ones that we see most commonly. But I'd love to hear from you as well. Secondly, if you just would like to have further dialogue on IT service management or enterprise service management or enterprise IT, always happy to have that dialogue as well. And then lastly, if this really resonated for you and you sort of scratching your head and you say you'd like to dig really deeper into IT service management and maybe look at your current platform and possible changes to that, we have a methodology, our Value First methodology, where we can walk you through some of that just as an initial dialogue to see if there's an opportunity to collaborate and work together on that. It'll tease out of you some of the things that maybe you won't be thinking about internally, challenging some of the assumptions that may have been made based on the current tool selection or what you're thinking about today. And it allows you to start to think more objectively and critically around how you might implement an IT service management platform going forward. Thanks. I hope this was valuable.